What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel, and I apologize for my hiatus here. For the last 10 days or so, I've been doing a lot of, just internal thinking and doing a lot of stuff around here on my own homestead, taking care of my business and stuff, and just trying to get things right. And so I apologize. I haven't been able to upload quite as often as I normally do, but I kind of also just needed a break from everything because, I can only come on here and warn people that World War III is at our doorstep, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I couldn't believe that in that video where I mentioned we're about to see a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. The very next day after I made that video, they announced that Russian nuclear-powered submarines were heading toward Cuba and were out there near the tip of Florida or whatever, and Navy vessels were swarming behind them and trying to follow them. So anyway, I needed to take a break from all that, and I needed to stop looking at all the World War III negativity, and I needed to focus inward on what can I do. A lot of us preppers, I've seen a lot of other prepper channels that will sell shirts with their logo on it, or whatever, and it says, Become Ungovernable. And I hear a lot of people, saying those sorts of things, but what does that really mean? How can you do that in 2024 and going forward? I don't know that it's truly, really, fully 100% possible, but I think you can get very close to it. And I think there's two ways to achieve ultimate freedom. One way, it's basically being born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Like, say you're Alex Soros, George Soros' son. Obviously, he's born into billions and billions of dollars, or you're, I don't know, anybody else. Just pick your poison. Klaus Schwab probably has some children and stuff like that, and they're born with this money and power and all this sort of stuff. And so they're probably truly the freest people on the face of the planet. But for the rest of us, how can we, become ungovernable, or at least less governable, to where you have more freedom? And how can you do that? Well, my plan requires a lot of discipline and hard work and stuff like that. So a lot of people aren't going to like this. But I came up with an 8-point plan here that I'm going to be applying to my own life. I've already applied many of these steps to my own life, but I thought I would share my plan with you guys that are like new to homesteading, or maybe you've been prepping for a while and you're starting to realize that you can only stack so many cans up and you can only use them before they go bad and before they spoil to a certain degree. And there are other ways to become more self-reliant where you don't have to have any input from, or very little input from, the outside world, right? And that means you can save a lot more of your own money. So a lot of people that are prepping, kind of the natural progression in my mind, or at least in my personal life, was, we started prepping, we started that was way back in the day, like after 9/11. And so we started prepping, buying extra stuff, things like that. And after a while, we got a whole bunch stacked up, and I was like, man, this is great. I feel a lot better, but I would feel even better if I was producing my own stuff here on my little homestead here. Right now, we're on my 2-acre suburb homestead. I have 100 acres that I'm trying to develop, but because of financial things and different things that have gone on since Biden came into power, I've had a harder time achieving my goals because everything costs 2 or 3 times more than it did in the Trump term. So I think that's pretty self-evident. You can blame that on COVID if you want to, but I don't. I blame it on Biden and his Democratic policies that have crippled the American economy in every direction he's pushed, right? So when the government leaves us alone, things go well. When we get to keep our money, things go well. The more money that the American people get to keep and they're not taxed on and things like that, the better the economy does. One of my best examples of that is you can go back to Calvin Coolidge. I know probably not a lot of people recognize that name. He's not one of the more popular or spoken about political, presidential candidate or presidents of the time. I can't remember the year that was, but Calvin Coolidge came in and taxes were outrageous. And he said, we're going to have this plan where we basically drop the bottom out of all these taxes. And they lowered them down. I'm not looking at the numbers here, but they lowered them down substantially. And immediately the economy took off like a rocket ship. And it lasted a long, long time until the next socialist came in and started ruining everything. But anyway, without further ado, These are the things that I'm trying to constantly achieve in my life, and I think they will help you if you're if you're a new homesteader, or you've just reached that point in your prepping where you're like, I have to do more and more and more. And maybe you're outgrowing your little suburb house like I am here, and you need a bigger area. You need to start looking into this stuff. First of all, the number one thing to give you the ultimate freedom, even if you do nothing else on this list, this is the most important thing. Become debt free. And I mean in every way. Cut up your credit cards if you have to. Now, my wife keeps a Discover card, or something. Maybe it's not Discover, maybe it's MasterCard. I don't know. I don't use it, but she uses it sometimes. But she pays the balance off at the end of the month every month, right? We don't keep a balance or hold a balance on that sort of stuff, because the interest rates are extremely high right now, and especially if you're on the lower level, on the entry level, and you haven't built up a lot of credit and stuff like this, your credit card rates are going to be extremely high, but even on your house. So I hope that you're a homeowner or you're working towards home ownership. Double up on your payments if you can afford it. In the good times, double up on your payments. It'll help you immensely. One time, years and years ago, when we bought our first house, I sat down one night with a calculator and I figured out how much it would cost me to buy that house if I paid out their payment plan for 30 years. The house, when we originally bought it, was like a $60,000 house with 1 acre. It was a small house, right? But it was a great starter home for my wife and I. We lived there for about 12 years, I think. Anyway, I sat and did the math one night. What would happen if I sat here for 30 years and paid them their monthly payments? It would have cost me like $275,000 or $280,000. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was well over $250,000 that I was going to be paying just because of the interest on that payment to use their credit system, right? So you don't have to do that. You can opt out of that. You can double up on your payments and pay it off earlier, therefore saving on all that interest you would have gotten in the last 15 years or whatever. So my advice, become debt free. Pay your house off. Pay your car off. If you can't afford to buy that car with cash, then that means you can't afford it. I know that's so foreign to a lot of people. I see so many new cars on the road now, my mind is blown. Every time I go anywhere, I've got the oldest truck in the parking lot, and it's a 93 Chevy, and it's only because I bought the thing used in 99, and I'm a mechanic, so I know how to take care of stuff, and it's been super reliable for me. And that's one of those things you're gonna need, is something reliable. You're gonna have to be willing to, when your friends show up at work and they've got a brand new car and you're a little bit jealous and you're like, man, I'd like to have that. I'd like to feel that. I'd like to smell that brand new car every day for a while. At least it would make my trip to work less miserable. I'd see what I'm working for. I know guys, I've done those same excuses. I've played those same games. But in reality, in the long run, what I did, I ended up, when I was making better money back in the day, the same sort of deal happened. Everybody was buying new trucks. So I went out and I bought a used truck, but it was like a program vehicle. So it had like very low miles. It was almost new. It was the newest vehicle I had ever owned. It was a 2006 Chevrolet truck, extended cab, short bed. And I hated it. I had my 93 still. Thankfully, I didn't sell it. I kept my 93. The reason I bought the new truck was I told myself, well, I don't have time because I'm working too much now. And I was supervisor at that point, and I thought, well, supervisor should drive a pretty nice truck, or whatever. I don't know. I was selling myself all these different lies, talking myself into this payment plan. It was one of the stupidest mistakes I ever made in my life. I lost tons of money when I sold that truck, because you always lose money when you buy something. I think I paid $15,000 for it, and I couldn't hardly give it away at that time. I think I sold it for like 12, maybe 11 something, 11.5. But yeah, I lost it big time on that one. On all the other cars in my armada of vehicles that I currently own, and all the ones I've owned in the past, I've been able to make money on those vehicles on the end of the sale. You don't make money on newer vehicles. It's just, at least for me, it's very hard to do that. So become debt free, number one. Again, I probably lost half the audience right there because they're already on eBay planning to use their credit card to buy the next thing that they want to make them feel more comfortable. You know, some people have a philosophy of, well, when the bottom drops out, who's going to come collect the debt? So I should run the debt up to the max. And I would totally disagree with that. So far, all we've seen is slow motion SHTF, slow motion collapse, okay? And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon unless nukes start falling out of the sky or something like that. Or unless the economy totally goes bust or something like that, then I don't think that's going to happen. It's not going to be a sudden, you know, major event, SHTF event. It's going to be slow incrementalism. It's going to happen slowly until we're all broke and we have nothing and we, you know, not even a pot to piss in. So that's my opinion. Become debt free. Don't be a debt slave. There's a reason there's that term, debt slave, is because whoever you owe money to, they own a portion of your life. And so become debt free. If you absolutely have to borrow money for some reason, look inward in your family, you know, talk to different family members, tell them the situation you're going through. And if you do borrow money, pay it back under the terms you agree to. Number two, I mean, you could even set up a deal where they make a little bit of money on interest if you'd like to set it up that way, depending on who it is in your family. So debt-free, number one, stay that way. Number two, learn everything while you can. Right now we have at the tips of our fingerprints, right now at the tips of our fingertips, right now at the tips of our fingers, we have almost unlimited access to all the knowledge you might need to become self-reliant, to set up solar equipment, to, you know, homestead, to farm, to raise goats, to, you know, in fact, that's what I've been doing a whole lot of. I haven't been watching a lot of news. I've been watching a whole lot of YouTube videos about, and searching the web, what kind of fencing is required for goats? What's the best fencing? You know, I only want to put it up one and be done with it. Hopefully it'll last forever. So I've been looking into that. What requirements, you know, what breeds of goats work the best in my area? And the reason I want goats first is because I've got a whole bunch of like undesirable plants out there amongst my forest, like poison ivy and other things that are a big treat to goats. So if I could get goats out there and have like this symbiotic relationship where they're eating the stuff that I don't want and cleaning up my forest floor at the same time, I mean, that's a win-win. So I want to do all that stuff, but I'm trying to learn everything I can now, just in case that Klaus Schwab activates his cyber polygon or whatever they called it, where a cyber attack that's way worse than COVID cripples the entire internet system around the world. Or maybe the Russians take one of those nuclear torpedoes and hit that internet cable that goes over to Europe or something. That would cause some serious upheavals, I guess, here in the United States of America. It would definitely disrupt our economy. So watch out for that sort of stuff. While the internet is here and all that stuff is available at the tip of your finger right now, it may not be in the future. So I'm trying to load my brain up with all the information. I didn't grow up a rancher or a farmer or anything like that. I had a few relatives that like had some horses or, you know, had some rabbits or had some goats or whatever, but never anybody that was seriously doing it as a homesteader. And I say learn everything because I think you want your homestead to be diverse. I'm not big into like monoculture or monocrops. Like, you know, a lot of these commercial farms, you'll see everything is corn or everything is wheat or whatever crop they're growing, right? Or all cattle. I don't like that because those markets fluctuate and you want to have, you know, you want to have goats, you want to have pigs, you want to have chickens, for one thing, I eat all of that stuff. I haven't eaten goat yet, but I hear it's delicious. I plan to eat it. I want meat goats, not dairy goats, because dairy goats, to me, are a pain in the neck. You have to go out there and milk them all the time. While you may get that milk, that's going to be a whole different level of animal husbandry that I'm not looking for. I don't want to milk any critters every day and have to do all that crap. I want it to be pretty well self-reliant. Now, I know with goats, you have to do certain things like, this is why I'm researching. You know, if you go out there half-cocked and you buy the wrong variety of goats, you're going to have problems because they're going to need to be milked or they're going to need their hooves clipped more often. And that's something I didn't even know until I started looking into this. But yeah, I mean, you have to take care of your goats' hooves, and sheep too. And sometimes you have to trim them. So you're going to have to build a little stand where you can put the goat up there and make it comfortable for you. And you're going to have to learn how to do that without hurting the animal. And you're going to have to stay on top of it, and other things. They get parasites and things like that. So every different critter you have on your property, especially something you're growing to either consume yourself or to sell to other people or trade to other people, you need to know everything you can know about it right now. Print it out if you can, get booklets on it, whatever you have to do. I'm sure there's lots of literature out there on it, but do all that before you do the next step, because the next step, number 3, is the big one. Buy land. Now you're committed. Once you buy this land, I guess you could resell it if you change your mind in a few years, but hopefully that wouldn't happen. I would recommend buying land. There's other ways to do it. You could rent land from people. If maybe you've got a relative that owns some land, maybe you could get with them and come over and, get 5 acres off of that. But I think you need more than 5 acres. If you're going to try to really make a profitable homestead that you can be as ungovernable as possible on, you're going to have to own your own land. And it needs to be the right land in the right state. Personally, you couldn't give me land in a lot of these blue states, like California and places like that. Now, obviously, if somebody tried to give me some land in California, unless it was, some trick or something, I would take the land and I would immediately sell the land. But my point is, because it's super expensive out there. But my point is I wouldn't want to live there personally. I'm probably wrong. I'm sure there's places in Northern California that are just as cool as it is where I'm at here in the central United States, but I personally wouldn't want to live there. And so I would want to be in a red state, somewhere that's going to protect your rights and stuff like that. So buy land, the right land in the right state. And personally, at least a personal preference of mine, is have water on that land of some kind. Either a pond, or maybe you buy land that butts up to the side of a lake or a river or something like that. Now, river land and creek land, that creates its own other set of issues that I don't have to deal with. But buy land. They ain't making no more of it, as they say, because you're buying freedom to do whatever you want within reasonable limits on your own property. So highly recommend that. Number 4, buy equipment. You're going to need equipment to take care of that land. For one, we've got 100 acres, so I have a 4-wheeler over here that's off camera that if you follow the channel, you've seen it several times. It's a 500cc 4-wheel drive utility style 4-wheeler. I could I could pull some pretty heavy stuff with that thing. There's times when I only need the 4-wheeler, and it's gas powered. It's easy to load up on a small trailer and take it over to my land and do whatever work I need, for like moving junk around and pulling little small trailers around. I can't beat that Bombardier 500. It's awesome. On the other hand, it doesn't brush hog. I've seen those Swisher mower things that you pull behind the 4-wheeler, and that might be fine for taking care of a trail. But you're not going to be brush hogging fields, week after week, month after month with something like that and expect it to last. You need a machine like this if you've got more than 15 or 20 acres. And you're going to need a big machine. You're going to need a front end loader. You're going to need a brush hog. You're going to need, most likely, unless your land is already perfectly flat and sculpted, you're going to need to go out and buy some dirt moving equipment like box blades and angle blades, and you might need some people call them rock rakes and other people call them landscape rakes for like cleaning out the forest and stuff like that. And, because if you're going to have goats and you're going to have other animals, there's going to be a point when you're going to want to run them out in your woods. And to do that, the only way that I've found that's a reasonable way to do that is that Premier One is the brand I'm aware of, but there's electric net fencing that has little step-in stakes and stuff, and you could take that out in the woods, but you still have to clear it down so that it doesn't ground out to any vegetation. So you'll have to run some sort of machine up through there to create a path to set the fence in. But once you do that, you can turn the goats loose in there, and they'll browse everything up to the point, depending on what variety goats you have and how tall they are, they'll browse everything up almost to 6 feet. And so it helps you immensely clean out your forest and stuff like that. But you're going to need the proper equipment. If you have livestock, you're going to have some way to transport those things. So like some sort of a livestock trailer Or I've seen some guys, they'll build a cage that they can put in like the back of a Chevy truck or a Ford truck, or they'll build a cage that they can set into their trailer when they need it, and then they can run their goats inside of there, and maybe you need to take them to the vet or whatever. You know, I don't know why you'd need to move them, but that's one potential business opportunity, is if you have enough goats, you know, you can rent your goats out. Once your pastures are all taken care of and your woods are all browsed up to where you want them, you could rent those goats out to other people that may want the same sort of, you know, service there on their property, but they don't want to own goats, right? And so with that Premier One fencing, that gives you that option to be able to load your goats up, take them to your neighbor's place, set the fencing up, turn them loose, let them graze and browse for however many days, and you know, move on to the next place, and you're making money on those goats, and your goats are getting fed, so it's a win-win. Again, I love those win-win situations that are only created when you invest in yourself. And that's what all of this is about, is being your own boss, not having somebody else lording over you, and not making profits for someone else, instead making profits for yourself. So that brings us into number 5. You're going to have to create an income from your property of some kind. You know, I already talked about goat rental. You know, there's also, let's stick to goats for just a second. There's goat breeding. You know, you could get into a breeding program where you're only selling kids once or twice a year. That's what they call the baby goats, kids. You're only selling those once or twice a year, right? But maybe that brings you enough income to buy all the feed for the year for those goats or something like that. It may not, you know, you're not going to get rich on any one of these things, but with a diverse farm, you're going to have multiple sources of income that you can pull from, and maybe that helps you buy some new fencing so you can get some more goats or whatever, right? It's all, how big of a vision do you have? How much do you want to farm? How many goats do you want to have? How many cattle, or whatever you're comfortable raising, whatever you want to do, you have to decide on that and have the land to sustain that. You know, I was telling somebody something recently. We were talking about raising cattle out in the West versus raising them, let's just say, east of the Rocky Mountains. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains, it's been said that you can have one cow. No, I'm wrong about that. I'm sorry. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains, it's been said to me locally here, I don't know how true this is, but local farmers have said this to me, that you can have 10 cows per acre, but you're going to need to like rotate them often. In west of the Rocky Mountains, where water is a lot more scarce and the vegetation is a lot more arid and, you know, high desert and stuff like that, it's 10 acres per cow. That's why I got turned around earlier. But yeah, that's what I've been told. If you're just, so depending on where you are, that's going to determine, you know, and what kind of vegetation you have on your property. That's going to determine how big of a livestock load you can put on that property, and also your management skills. I really like the, what do they call it, mob grazing, where you put them on a bunch of head of cattle or a bunch of head of goats or sheep or whatever on one field for 2 or 3 days until they eat it down. Then you move them to the next one. You don't leave them there any longer than you have to. And they mob graze it, and they knock it down really quick, and it supposedly recovers really quick. So I like that. Go check out Joel Salatin, I think's the guy's name. I may be getting the names confused, but the guy that does, he's a farmer. He's all over YouTube here. I'm sure you guys have seen him, but it's all about sustainable farming and stuff. I love that guy. I don't know if that's his name or not. I may be saying the wrong name, but the guy, the older guy that's been teaching his whole family, and he has like he has classes and all sorts of stuff. There's lots of opportunities out there for you to learn from other people, and don't be afraid to admit you're ignorant in a certain topic and go learn these things. But you need to create an income from your property of some kind. Livestock, selling, you know, baby piglets or whatever, selling, you know, calves, whatever you want to do, there's potential there. It could be, maybe you have an area where you grow the best asparagus around, and you can be the asparagus person. But, you know, again, I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. I would definitely want to be as diverse as possible. But you're going to be able to create income from that property. Maybe you have a wooded lot that's just covered wall to wall with trees, and you're wanting to build some access so you can build some structures and stuff in the future. and open that up, maybe for grazing or whatever you're wanting to do, you can cut that wood, turn it into firewood, and sell that wood. If you have the right kind of timber, you could probably sell it to local sawmills and stuff like that and make some money off of the timber on your property as you're cutting it down, in a responsible way. I wouldn't recommend going in there and clear cutting anything, but if you go through, all of these forests that I have on my 100 acres could stand to be thinned out a little bit. And that may mean just coming in and taking out some of these littler trees so that the other more established trees have a chance to thrive. But there's lots of ways to create income from a farm property. I mean, there's rental stuff, I was toying with the idea here recently of setting up a not just any shooting range, but a shooting range that would cater to like police and law enforcement for training and stuff like that on the back 40 of my 100 acres. I thought, I could set up a 300-yard rifle range right here. I could set up a really awesome pistol range and put in very minimal facilities. I'd probably have to build one, 30 by 30 building like we're sitting in here for them to have like classroom time. But, if you think outside of the box, my point is there's lots of different things that you could do, especially if you're in a more remote area where nobody's going to care if you're shooting guns, once a week or twice a week or whatever. Because a deal like that, if it was open to, the reason I was thinking that way is if it was open to the public, then it'd be shooting every day all the time. And that would get annoying to everybody around. But if it was like a law enforcement only type deal, you could specifically target and advertise to them. And again, to me, it'd be a lot of fun to set up those targets that flip out like this and the ones that move by, you could take it as far as you wanted to and do it all safely, of course, and things like that. But that's an income opportunity that I'm considering on my property. And oh, by the way, I like to shoot. So wouldn't hurt my feelings any for all the rest of the week when they're not having a class for me to be able to go out there and target practice and, take care of the range, keep everything mowed down, all that sorts of stuff. Maybe during the week, maybe I let them have classes on the weekend, and during the week I'm running my goats and my cattle and my sheep out there, right? And then you move them before the shooting starts. So anyway, there's lots of income potential. You just have to think outside of the box. I wouldn't recommend this. I don't like renting my property out to other people unless I know them well. But I've heard of people leasing out their property when you're not able to develop it just yet because maybe the economy's too bad. You could get a local farmer oftentimes that already has 100 head of cattle and he's running out of pasture to graze them. Sometimes you can work a deal out where the farmer will come over and put up the fence because he's already set up to put up fencing. He'll bring his equipment over and put up a fence, and as long as you give him a lease agreement to allow him to graze those cattle for a certain amount of time or for that year or whatever, right? So there's options like that. You can have other people come in. Maybe you've got a lot more pasture than I do. I've probably got 30 acres of pasture, I'm guessing, maybe 35 or 40. But anyway, the point is I could have somebody come in with the hay equipment. I can't afford to purchase all that hay equipment, even though my tractor would do it. For one, I know nothing about cutting hay. So I'm not to say that I couldn't learn about it. Sure I could, but step two would be buying a bunch of hay equipment. And I briefly looked at that stuff the other day, and it's out of my price range. It's like Ferrari money, right? And I'm like, no, I don't want to make Ferrari hay bales. I want to just make quick and easy hay bales. Well, I started thinking there's other people that are set up like that. And you can oftentimes get with somebody that's close by you where they don't have to move their equipment far. If they're set up for haying, they can come over and cut your hay. And oftentimes you can work a split with them where they'll take 70%, leave you 30% or something like that, right? And expect they're going to take the best premium bales, but you're getting free hay out of the deal. You could sell that hay. You could use it for other projects, use it for, ground cover, use it for feeding your own livestock, whatever. My point is there's always opportunities like that once you have that land, once you have some equipment, and you're creating an income from your property. Number 6 is you're going to want to think about the entire time all of this is going on. We're doing all this other stuff. You're thinking about long-term sustainability and how to become more self-reliant. Again, I've already said it, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm not really big into monoculture of any kind. I want a diverse farm. I want a multitude of species. For one, I think it's more fun. It keeps it more interesting. It keeps you learning more. And that's what it's all about. I think that's why we're here on this earth, is to become better stewards of the earth and to learn as much as possible. And there's just something special about it when you know, I haven't done it with goats or with sheep or any other larger livestock, but we've had several batches of bunnies, and it's special every time. You know, you see these little baby bunnies, and they suckle on their mama until they're old enough to be weaned, and then they're on their own under your care. It's amazing. The miracle of life, man. And if you got children, I think they need to experience that. So with my rabbit herd, the way I justify it to myself when it's culling day, with my rabbit herd, the way I look at it is 99.9% of their life is great. They get taken care of, they get food and water every day. If it gets too hot, I give them some frozen water bottles so they can lay up against that. They have pretty good lives, and I give them pretty good sized cages to be in. You know, I don't want them to be in a small area. I want them to be able to move around, and I give them treats all the time, and I pet them. All that stuff's great until the day it comes to cull them. You have to kill them, and that's the one bad day. And it's not fun. I take no pleasure in doing it, but at the same time, it's one of those things that until you eat meat grown on your own homestead and your own property, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. It's just something special about that. So long-term sustainability. Find things like rabbits that can help your other endeavors. You know, rabbit manure will help your garden, obviously. You know, goats can help you utilize more of your land. Sheep can help you reduce the amount of diesel you're having to use to brush hog and stuff like that. Number 7, off-grid. I'm going to try to, eventually get into off-grid, but the thing is that's not my number one focus. I'm going to phase in, slowly, incrementally go into more and more off-grid setup, right? I'll probably start out with grid power, and then eventually the plan is to phase out as much as we possibly can and make our own power. If nothing else, for the freedom that it's going to give me. The ability to flip my switch on the wall without somebody else coming in and saying, oh, you're doing something we don't like, we're cutting your power off. That's one of those, you don't think about it, but they have that power over you. They can control you by shutting your power off. You don't believe me? Go flip that switch off, your breaker switch, and spend 3 or 4 days without power in the heat like I am right here. You're going to get miserable pretty quick. But if you have off-grid, if you have a backup, if you have a plan, when everything else fails, let's say the grid collapses. If it's not, if it's like a cyber attack instead of an EMP, if it's a cyber attack and none of your solar stuff's hooked up to the internet, everything you have is going to still work. Everybody else on the grid is going to be without power. So that's why I want it. I may not ever be 100% off grid. I may be like 80% off grid, and then once in a while, that's one of the troubles, at least the way it's set up right now. I'm not saying you can't weld off of solar power and stuff like that. You can do it. There's a channel I watch called SV Seeker, and the guy has built an entire sailboat, and now it's out in the ocean, and I see him welding on it and doing things, with his solar power that he produces there on his boat. So it is possible. It's just more difficult. You have to have a lot more batteries, a lot bigger inverters and things like that to pull big loads like a welder and things. So I see myself, let's say 80 or 90% off grid. And then if the grid did collapse, I'd have 80 or 90% of my capacity or my original capability. So I'd be able to run lights. My wife would be able to run her hair dryer, all the essentials, right? Whatever else you need electricity for, you'd be able to have it. So I like that just as a future sort of a phase into solar, phase out of the grid. Also, I think it's going to help in your older years, in your retirement age and stuff like that, to not have these bills, because I don't know about you guys, but the first time I paid an electric bill versus today when I pay an electric bill, it's substantially higher than it was for the very first one that I paid. And it's not because I'm using less electricity or more electricity. It's because price per kilowatt has exploded since I first got out of my mom and dad's house and started living on my own. So I expect that trend will continue to go higher and higher and higher. Eventually, you're going to be priced out of being able to afford that electricity, so you'll have to be off-grid in some capacity. I recommend it. Number 8, I almost left this off the list because it's not for everybody. And to be honest, my wife and I have already passed this point in our life where we can even do this, but I'm telling it to you for advice for the future. Have lots of kids. If you're trying to do any of this other stuff that I'm talking about here, and you're trying to become a real homesteader, a real farmer, and you're trying to become, a property where you can create income and all that sorts of stuff, right? And make your own food there on the farm, slaughter your own animals if you want to, however far you want to take it. Have lots of kids. We only had one, and at the time when we made the decision to only have one kid, it was the right decision then for us at that time in our life. But I didn't know I was going to one day be a land baron and own 100 acres, okay? I didn't know this was going to happen. At that time in my life, everything looked so dark that I didn't see any way out of it. I didn't see any way of ever having a big chunk of land like that. But I was wrong. I just needed more patience. And if I had it to do over again, especially knowing where I landed and where my wife and I, the direction my wife and I want to go, and you got to have a partner that's on board with you. If they're putting up resistance at every turn, you're never going to make it. You have to have somebody that has a shared vision with you. Have lots of kids, lots of kids. You'll be able to teach those kids, homeschool them, teach them the real ways of the world. Show them what happens. They'll know the truth. They'll know what true, beef tastes like, or true goat meat, or fresh eggs, or whatever, because they'll be a part of that process. If they grow up that way, I think it will help them immensely. From my experience, farm kids don't seem to have any problems telling the difference between a man and a woman, or a male and a female, okay? They know biology because they've seen it and witnessed it in nature their entire lives. And they're some of the best people you'll ever meet. Kids that grew up on the farm, even if one day they say, "Dad, I don't want to farm anymore. I want to go out into the big world, into the big city and whatever." That's fine. Let them do that. Maybe one day they'll come back and help you out. And maybe one day they'll see your vision was the true freedom. And all this freedom, it comes at a high cost, man. A lot of money, a lot of equipment, a lot of land. You're going to worry about stuff. You're going to stress about stuff, but it's going to keep you in pretty good shape because you're going to be out working every day on your business. That's what's so important and critical about it. You're working for yourself. So guys, we've gone on a long time here explaining these 8 steps to becoming ungovernable. Let me know down in the comments, did I miss anything? Am I wrong about this? And I get it. Again, I'll admit, this vision is not for everyone. This is my vision. This is how I'm going to become as free as I possibly can become while I'm on this earth. I highly recommend it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys are thinking about, what your plans are for your homesteads. I always love reading them. It always helps to keep this conversation going, because we may learn something from each other at some point or another. I know I've learned lots from the commenters that I just would have never even thought about. So, as always, guys, I stand for liberty to the bitter end, and I hope you'll join me someday on your own homestead or farm. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time.